I asked a friend of mine to come because I think his story is so interesting. So many of you have been in the community for a while. And Adam is running Entrada. So he stepped into this role a couple of years ago. And one of the most interesting things for me as I sit in my role for Women in Tech is we know a lot about companies and about how women feel about them. It's just the ecosystem that we sit in. Women, for some reason, have a very different underground network of how they talk about companies and how they ask for referrals and how they think about companies that they should go to. And I told Adam this too. A couple of years ago, no one would have ever published this, but women were not going to go work at Entrada. It was a company that women were not attracted to for a whole series of reasons. And Adam came in 2 years ago, and he has completely changed that. There are actually more Women Tech Award finalists working at Entrada today than any other company in the state. And I'm fascinated by this journey because in the world of tech and in the world of trying to change cultures, this is a constant conversation. Everyone asks, how do I hire more women? Everyone asks, how do I increase the number of women in tech? And then to have someone do that in 2 years, it really is amazing and something that we can learn so much from. So I asked Adam to come and join me so we could talk a little bit about what that journey has been like and how he's been able to change something that I'm not sure I would have believed could have changed. And so, Adam, thank you for being here, and please join me on stage.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I'm very nervous.
You're very nervous?
Well, it's probably that underground network you were just talking about, but yes. I wore my Tiffany Air Force Ones to impress everybody.
Oh, I saw some unboxing
nervous.
of those. Yeah, that's very nice.
Okay.
Yeah, Adam came and he's like, oh, I didn't really think there'd be that many people.
This is a big audience, but I'm excited.
And it's a great audience. Okay, so you tell us a little bit about how you ended up joining Entrada.
Oh gosh, I'm talking about taking a breather. So the company I ran before this was called Podium. Was there for 4.5 years with the two co-founders, loved every second of it. And we went from 1 to 100 million of ARR in 4.5 years, and it almost drove me into the ground, personally, emotionally, spiritually, with my family. So Katie Morrow from Podium, by the way. I see so many people I've worked with before. This is making it a lot less, making me a lot less nervous. We had like a midlife crisis, my wife and I, and we moved down to San Clemente, California, and I kind of thought I was just done. Like I found myself in the hospital one night at the end of 2019 after a series of just illnesses and things that went wrong, and left, and I was just planning on, I didn't know what I was gonna do. Sit on boards, join a venture fund, maybe go take a CEO gig. I didn't really know. Learned a lot about myself during that year. Figured out what was important to me, and was able to really reflect on the companies that I had been a part of building, what I was proud of, what kind of was things I would do differently. And there was one conversation, I remember when Google Ventures invested in Podium, I remember the partner was on site and they brought their talent team in to meet with us from Google Ventures. And they showed us a quad chart, and it was a study that Google Ventures had done on finding a balance between high performance and psychological safety. And like, nobody can do that. And I remember thinking at the time, we were really good at performance at that business and not good at psychological safety. So that's when I kind of decided, like, all right, I want to finally figure out how to do both of those. And I set up a few rules for myself. One, okay, I'm not gonna work with anyone I don't like ever again. So I get to pick the exec team, I get to pick the board, and I get to pick all the investors. So I thought I had to start something new. Like, to get all of those, you have to start a company, right? So I had a plan for a business, came out to Utah, I had met with like Josh James and Jeremy Andrus and Ryan Smith, and my plan was to tell them about my idea, get them to invest and make their companies buy it. So Dave ends up finding out, it's a good strategy, right? Dave finds out I'm interested in getting back in the game, and we start talking about, why don't you come to Entrada? And as I learned more, there was no board, there was no exec team, and there were no investors. So but there were 2,200 employees and this beautiful business. The other thing that I really wanted to find in my next gig is every business I've ever started was like a horizontal marketing software product that is great, it adds value, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, it's not that big of a deal. And I wanted to find a business that really impacted the human experience and made it better. And I found that in Entrada. Fell in love with the place, and I think it's going to be one of the most important companies ever built in Utah, partially because of what we do. I mean, you think about when people go we build software for apartment communities. You think about when people go find new apartments, those are usually accompanied by very emotional events, having babies, marriage, graduation, divorce, someone in the family is sick that requires you to move. And our software helps these frontline community managers' jobs so much easier so they can focus on that human aspect. And we can take all the operational stuff out of the way. So that's why I joined. That's why I fell in love with it. It's an amazing business. It was amazing long before I got there. But I don't know if the story was being told about how great it could be. And that's also what partially attracted me is, I'm a student of kind of the history of Silicon Slopes, and I found that the legacy of companies that are built here just become the legacy of those who built it. And the people who built Entrada, which is far more than just a few people or a few founders, it's many executives over 20 years, they deserve that, that legacy. And so I'm honored to be a part of it and play a small role. Okay,
so when you joined, and there were no women around the table, did you, how did that journey start of transforming that culture?
Gosh, this was the question you sent me yesterday that made me super, super nervous. So let me just tell everyone, one of my weird little triggers is most people with my title, you're not one of them, are like narcissistic sociopaths, right? I don't like to be confused with one of those. So when you send this question, I'm like, whatever I say, I don't want it to come out as me saying, because I'm so amazing. So just know that's not what I'm saying here. No, I took like I said, there was no board, no exec team, no investors. So I was really careful about who those few people are. When companies are really small, the culture is really the culture of the founders' personalities. And then once you hit about 50 employees, it kind of becomes the collective personalities that create the culture. And then at that point, as a leader or a founder of a business, the only control you have over the culture is who you invite into it. This was a 2,200 person company that I joined in the middle of COVID with a culture that I had to try and morph myself into. So the only thing I really could control is who I invited into it and people who were already there and amazing. There's actually a lot of amazing women in leadership roles at Entrada who were there before I came. Many of them that will be executives in this community for a long, long time. It was finding the people who wanted to go, have the same goals as me, the same focus on diversity, and making sure that the new executives I brought in had that same priority. So one of the first executives that joined was our CTO, Jason Taylor, who is super active in this community, and Jason is a huge supporter of women in tech. It was important to him as well. And then it just starts to snowball, and then all of a sudden you get, all of a sudden Catherine Wong works here, and I'm like, I don't even know how that happened exactly. But I've known Catherine for 14 years, and I couldn't be more honored to have someone of that quality here. So when you sent me that stat of 8 women in tech finalists that work at Entrada, I was super humbled by that. And that wasn't like a goal I wrote on a whiteboard 2.5 years ago, but I'm honored that that's happened. I think it's important that it's happened. When you were showing all your stats, I was glad that we beat all of them at Entrada, although we still have a long way to go. But we've got amazing leaders there. Like Catherine, I had to peel her out of retirement, and I won't let her go back into retirement because she needs to be a multi-time CEO in this community. She's going to be a really, really good one. So don't worry, I won't let her retire again.
What do you think you have seen from the day that you started to today that have been the biggest kind of changes? Or even if you had to isolate, this is one thing I've learned that I now would do time and time again because it's made such a meaningful difference for your ability to retain that kind of talent.
I've been on kind of a journey over the last few years that started that year I took off in San Clemente of trying to become acutely self-aware of my own unconscious biases and my strengths and my weaknesses. Look, I grew up like a couple miles down the road here in South Jordan in the river bottoms. I grew up in the predominant religion. I'm a white dude. I like to cycle. I kind of have certain groups. I go to jazz games. I go to BYU football games. I kind of have inherent unconscious biases that I don't know about. And I'm gonna make fun of myself for a minute. One of them, Corinne Clark, I hired her to be the CEO of Allegiance. And her first day on the job was, it was like January 2nd. And at Allegiance, oh, I'm such an idiot. Over the Christmas break, I would do a beard growing competition. Like I really did this. And then the women would vote on who had the best beard.
What were you thinking?
Oh, exactly, that was exactly, Corinne came in, she's like, what is your problem? I'm like, yeah, this might have been a mistake. There's just dumb, like that was clear back in 2009, like thank goodness that like, I've tried to become acutely aware of that. So I think for any leader, that's probably been the main thing I've learned, is you have to have a deep understanding for what those are. And it's the reason you need diversity on your team. And not diversity just for gender or for race or any other specific, but you need diversity of thought and the way that people think and the way that they bring ideas together. I asked Catherine this question, I'm like, why did you come? And like she made this one interesting observation. She said, I could tell that your exec offsites weren't boys' trips. They were like, we would have like a one-day offsite at a hotel that was near the office, and then I wanted people to be able to go home to like take kids to mountain bike practice or to go to, the recital. I didn't know that was an unconscious bias that in my past, I probably was very guilty of turning exec offsites into these 3-day boys trips and not even realizing that that's unconsciously what I was doing. So for me, that's probably my biggest learning is if you don't understand that, you're not even gonna know when you're like stepping on tripwires.
So how do we help other people like have those ahas? Like you had this really deep journey, and because of that, it actually, whether you thought about all the steps that you were changing or not, the results that I see from the community, I know Catherine really well, right? And like I also know she wouldn't have made that choice 4 years ago. And so there's this question I always have in my mind of, we still have companies who haven't evolved in the same way, who haven't embraced that same thinking. And so I'm always thinking about, like, what are the things, like you are a perfect example of changing something that is meaningful for all of us in the room. And how do we create that as a catalyst for change in other things? Because if you didn't have that experience over the last 4 years, you might not have been on the same path. And we don't want everyone to have that experience to realize they must make change.
I mean, that's a really, really good question. I think what you're doing here is helping. Like, I stumbled into a lot of this self-awareness and this desire to kind of figure out what my own kind of dark side was. When I'm talking to other CEOs, I talk a lot about having my exec coach is here in the room, Rachel Jensen, right over there. I see her every week. I've got a wife. They will show me when I'm messing up. I don't know if my mom's here. I've got a strong mom. Like, I've been able to look up to these examples. And the more examples you have of strong women in leadership, the easier it's going to get for the next generation to come through. So I'm not trying to plug my podcast, but the Fourth Node podcast we released yesterday. We interviewed Corinne. So Corinne Clark, and she has great advice for everyone in this room, but also for leaders. She's like, we need leaders, whether you're male, female, whatever, pushing women into opportunities, giving them at-bats. Like a few things I'm pretty good at as a CEO is I know how to raise money. I'm really good at running board meetings. I know how to build teams. The best thing I can do is teach Catherine how to run board meetings like I do. And then when she's running her board meetings, she's had some at-bats. The only way to run a board meeting is to do it wrong a few times. The only way to raise money is to raise money at really bad terms and go sell a company and be like, oh, that's what a participating preferred preference is. I should not have that the next time I raise money. Noted. I try to just be inclusive in, not that everything I do is right, because it for sure isn't. But I just try and be really open about why I do what I do, how I do it, and just try and give people as many at-bats as we can, because that's the only way we really change it long term. And like you said, the 50-year thing is not acceptable for me either. And the only way we change that is we have to accelerate that training and the at-bats and the exposure and the experience to some of these difficult things that you can't get until you just try it, you know?
Thank you for sharing that. It's something that I firmly believe too, is this idea of acceleration, right? Put people in situations they can't normally get into, or in ways that you have all this experience that if they can learn, they're just so much better. As you've thought about how this then permeates the rest of your culture, are there specific things that you're doing? I do actually believe, even at a 2,200 person company, that the CEO sets the tone. And what they expect from their peers and then those people down, it does cascade down very strongly. But we also have gaps in leadership at all stages of the company, right? Where they also too have been changed to embrace those things. Are there intentional ways that you're working with the rest of your leadership to really embrace these changes?
Yeah, so the way I kind of run a business is, so my background is I have a master's of accounting, so I'm a numbers nerd. And so for me to be able to tell the story of where we're going for the business is I just do it with math. So when I got there, I took kind of the broader leadership group, which has a lot of really, really strong women in it. We meet once a month at least, at least every couple months. And I just started trying to teach them how like the math of SaaS works, growth rates, what the rule of 40 is, what gross margin means, what CAC ratio is, LTV to CAC. And then we all started speaking the same language. So they kind of knew really what I was trying to drive. And what's important to me, and I've always felt this, but in Trada we've been far more intentional about it, is if we can't build a financially successful business without doing a lot of good in our community, it's not worth it. I'd rather go ride my bike in San Clemente again, because that was a lot funner than this. This is a really hard job. So we've been very deliberate, and I took a lot of this from Mike Mon and Ryan Smith with Five for the Fight. I talked to them once about, why did you pick that? How did that come about? And they said, well, most CSR programs sprinkle a little bit across a million different little things, and then you don't make an impact. If you pick a couple, you can really make a difference. So we picked two. One is, we want to be a big sponsor and supporter of this group. And then we've also chosen the foster care system in Utah that Christian Andrus and a few of others have partnered with us on. It's one thing I feel strongly about is if our state can't take care of the most vulnerable children in our state, then we shouldn't be proud of everything else that we love to brag about how cool Utah is. If we don't take care of foster kids, we really shouldn't be bragging about anything. And I've just tried to make that super inclusive with the entire leadership group, and I feel like we have a lot of unity. It was tough entering a 2,200 person company with these leaders who'd done things for 10, 12, 15, 18 years, and I just had to be very explicit and intentional about just explaining the why and what the end goal would be. And some didn't like it and left. And that was totally fine. And Ashley Cowley and people like her and Emma Corbett, they stayed. And I'm grateful they did.
So I really appreciate you letting me ask all these hard questions along the way, because I think it is so critical to what that is. So what's that, when you think, kind of my final question for you here, when you think of all of the other CEOs, what's the one thing that you think they should all hear about as your summary of this journey that you've been on, that you think would help them to also drive change?
Gosh.
Also, I don't follow any question scripts that I ever give anyone. It's also true.
This is great. You've all seen A Star is Born with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga? Before she goes out for her big solo performance and they're on that rooftop looking at the billboard of her. And Bradley Cooper says to her, you better reach deep down inside and you better believe the words that you're gonna say, because if you don't really believe them, they're gonna know it. And that's probably the advice I give to other leaders is you really actually better care about diversity, because people are getting too smart now. They don't believe the TED Talks anymore. They don't believe you can jump up in front of a town hall, you can do press releases, you can come and pay money to organizations. But if you don't fundamentally believe it, and you can't authentically be who you are, it's just not gonna work long term. So Catherine gave me another cheat before coming in. There's a McKinsey article talking about kind of latest trends in women in tech. I think you covered a lot of the stats. But one of the themes was women in business in particular are becoming far more aware of facades inside companies. And they're congregating to the companies that believe it and actually believe and do diversity the right way. So for any other CEO or leader out there, if you truly believe it and you'll go execute on it, you're gonna have an amazing competitive advantage. Because I've watched it as all these amazing women have come and joined and have been promoted here. They're like little centers of gravity that start to attract the very, very best people. So, a lot of the work is now in their hands of continuing on and continuing to bring in talent. And I just feel fortunate to, like I said, to be a small part of it.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work and sharing the journey. Please join me in thanking Adam for stepping on stage today. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.